Escalation in President Trump's crackdown, the FBI has now executed a new search warrant at a Washington Post journalist's home in Virginia. The administration says this is part of an investigation into what they accuse of illegally retaining classified materials. The Post reporting FBI agents have now seized this reporter's phone, 2 laptops, and a watch. One of the laptops was a personal computer, the other a Washington Post issued laptop. Investigators tell the Post reporter that she's not the focus of this probe, that the target is a government contractor, and according to the criminal complaint, is alleged to have had secret documents in a lunchbox and his own basement, which could be a violation of the rules. Attorney General Bondi alleges the Post reporter also published illegally leaked information. Of course, that is, when you cover the government, what happens all the time. It is also worth noting the complaint, which may be partial, may only be the start of the story, but the complaint itself does not accuse that contractor of leaking classified information. Now, this is obviously drawing intense scrutiny because while the government does have wide latitude in legitimate national security cases, and there have been times in the past where we've seen, as a last resort, reporters basically dealt with and investigated, or their materials investigated in security litigation, this comes amid a time where the Trump DOJ under Bondi has very little credibility, and the president has mused about going after all kinds of opponents and has done so. And he and his allies have viewed many in the press, as you know, as their sort of political opponents. Times reports that it's exceedingly rare to search a reporter's home, and it refers to a 1980 law that bans searching reporters unless they are the suspect committed, they are the suspect in a criminal probe. Obviously, for example, being a journalist doesn't mean that the authorities can never deal with you if they have something separate from your journalism that you did wrong. Washington Post executive editor says this extraordinary aggressive action is deeply concerning and raises profound questions and concern around the constitutional protections for our work. Some of this was also telegraphed because the administration, in contrast to past administrations in both parties, had recently diluted the rules that protect journalists. So we knew they were already going down this road because there was some level of intent. If this is a valid factual pursuit, if ultimately they overturn and find materials that supports the investigation, everyone will look at that and report that out. But it comes at a time where the administration is going after all kinds of public opponents. It's going after the Federal Reserve Chair. It's using criminal probes to intimidate. And so there are obviously real questions about whether this pursuit, kind of breaking a line we haven't seen yet in the second term, of a mainstream major journalist's home and their property and their materials, whether that itself is an exception that's lawful or part of a larger selective prosecution campaign. As for developments in that campaign, look at the targeting of lawmakers. Democratic Senator Lisa Slotkin now says she has federal prosecutors investigating her, and their claim involves something that all lawmakers have very protected. It's literally in the Constitution. It's called the Speech and Debate Clause, and they refer to things she said in a video that was about the military following the law. You can think about the obvious irony or Orwellian twist of a lawmaker who, of course, has authority over writing the laws, reminding the military to follow them and not do unlawful orders or campaigns. And that itself is what this administration now says could be a crime. Slotkin is objecting to Trump's playbook, saying this is intimidation and physical intimidation meant to shut people up. Democratic Congressman Chrissy Houlihan says she was also contacted by the DOJ and is being investigated over the same video. And the Pentagon is using its powers, and this is different than criminal probes, but also suggests possible corruption because it is using the powers it has for its brave men and women who serve, which of course is supposed to be always patriotic and nonpartisan. But there are questions about political corruption at Hex's Pentagon and whether they are abusing the rules and authority they have over a Democratic senator from that video, who happens to be a retired naval officer, Mark Kelly. Now, in normal times, people who go from military service, showing their public service, their valor, their bravery, into Congress, that's usually considered a plus. But let's be clear. Kelly is saying, and his allies are objecting to the fact that it looks like the Trump administration is treating it as a kind of a minus, as a way to get leverage over him and now endangering his military rank, and something that people who do public service rely on is pension payments that come out of the past service. Senator Kelly is fighting back, filing this lawsuit against Hegseth and the department, trying to block what he says are these retaliation efforts. And these are the latest targets of a larger crackdown that we have been reporting on, because remember, even in MAGA land, where they say many things, admitting that they have an actual enemies list, that they would break rules and law and go after their enemies at the DOJ, that was too much for many in MAGA. And so when questioned about this originally, when they were taking in their jobs, confirmation hearings at the beginning of this year, they all resisted and said they don't have an enemies list. But you can look at it. You can see how they've weaponized investigations, subpoenas, probes. On the left in the green, you see some of these have already been dismissed because they are so weak, although they take time, money, and energy even when they end quickly. And on the right, you have cases that are going forward. Congresswoman indicted. Former Trump official Bolton indicted. And new this week, lower right corner, Jerome Powell facing a criminal probe because he says he's resisted Trump's unlawful efforts to kneecap the Fed to get a sugar-high economic plan to try to help Trump politically. Now, here's what Trump is saying about all this.
It's limited by my morality, and I have a very high grade of morality, so therefore it's limited.
Not the Constitution, not the courts. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Well, the Constitution and courts, that goes without saying. But you're asking me what really can stop? We'll never get to the courts. We'll never get to the Constitution, because I want to see what's good for our country. And you know what? The courts want to see that too.
Donald Trump doing an interview there with CBS.
Agents and the DHS and Kristi Noem so proud of their people. God bless them. And the reality is, in this breaking story, we know there's a lot of issues with ICE, setting aside the obvious things that have occurred. But where does that come from? And how much are we going to hold the Trump administration responsible over the long haul? Because it's been a full year since they first went into action. And there are some realities in this breaking story you have got to hear with regards to who truly are the people behind the mask. I'm going to show it to you in a few seconds. And if you just like Trump out, subscribe to the channel. But check out what this gentleman, lightly, says about how proud they are here.
So we've had almost 221,000 new recruits or applicants that have applied to be new recruits. You would think that the staggering amount of violence against ICE special agents and deportation officers would decrease our recruiting, but it actually hasn't had that effect.
And Bill Maher makes the actual real point, because it's all breaking story. And Moskowitz on the House floor was clear to state this about how much money we seem to confine to spend on them.
I don't know if you know this, but you guys have $858 million, again, almost $1 billion, okay, of money to give out bonuses to people. And so listen, bonuses are great when people do good work, but $858 million sounds like a lot of money. That's like a $40,000 bonus to every employee in all of ICE.
So in this breaking story, a journalist went on the inside, even with THC in her system, didn't matter. Check this breaking story out.
So ultimately, when you heard back from them, what was it?
So I missed the initial email because I wasn't expecting it. Again, I expected them to Google me, and they didn't. A few days later, they said a tentative job offer. And with that tentative job...
As we speak, 1,000 more could be on their way. According to the Star Tribune, that would make it 5 times the manpower of the Minneapolis Police Department. Joining us, former California Senator Barbara Boxer, Peter Baker, and Mark Short still with us. All right, let's talk about what we've been witnessing in Minneapolis. And Barbara, again, just to kind of thread the line through what I was saying a little bit earlier, there's a certain lack of decency in the way this administration has gone after Renee Good. Instead of waiting for an investigation or saying it's a tragedy or a terrible circumstance, they wish it didn't have to happen that way, but they understand the tension in the situation. They're saying that she's a domestic terrorist and that she deserved it in some cases.
It's a huge lie. Anyone who just reads about her knows that she was part of a group that was monitoring ICE through her kids' school to make sure that the children weren't harassed and the community was kept peaceful. Look, this whole thing is a nightmare. It's going to bite Trump hard. It's going to bite the Republicans hard. You know, you talk about spending money. You don't have enough money to help people buy their health insurance. You're cutting workers at Social Security. You're cutting veterans programs, childhood cancer research. But you have enough money to grab this woman out of her car, as you're showing now. 3 people, she's yelling. I've seen this. She was going to the doctor. This is what Trump is about. This is what the GOP is about. And I think that there are many issues we can talk about, but just seeing this alone, my husband saw this for the first time this morning, and he's a man who doesn't express emotion that much. He could barely contain himself. It's a mess. And to say that the way they've treated her is not decent.
Nutrition plays a foundational role in human development, especially during childhood and adolescence. What students eat affects not only physical growth, but also concentration, energy levels, and emotional balance. Because students spend a significant portion of their day in educational environments, the quality of food provided in these settings matters greatly. Over time, nutrition science has evolved. Research continues to deepen our understanding of how different foods influence learning, behavior, and long-term health. As this knowledge grows, it becomes important for institutions to revisit existing standards and ensure they reflect current evidence rather than outdated assumptions. Updating nutrition policies is rarely a simple task. Educational systems are complex, involving students, families, educators, administrators, food providers, and health professionals. Any change must balance nutritional goals with practicality, affordability, and cultural considerations. Successful updates typically rely on collaboration rather than isolated decision-making. One key principle in improving nutrition standards is putting student health first. This means evaluating food offerings based on their contribution to overall well-being, not just convenience or tradition. Foods that support steady energy, cognitive function, and long-term health are increasingly prioritized in modern programs. However, prioritizing health does not mean removing enjoyment. Taste, variety, and familiarity remain important. Programs that succeed often focus on gradual improvement, introducing healthier options while respecting preferences and providing opportunities for adaptation. Another important factor is expert guidance. Nutrition specialists, educators, and child development experts bring valuable insight into what works in real-world settings. Their involvement helps ensure that policies are grounded in evidence and tailored to students' needs at different ages. Expert input also helps address common concerns. Questions about cost, preparation, acceptance, and accessibility are best answered through experience and data rather than assumption. When experts collaborate with practitioners, solutions tend to be more realistic and effective. Collaboration itself is central to progress. Meaningful improvements often result from cooperation across different areas of responsibility. Health experts, education professionals, and community advocates each bring unique perspectives. When these perspectives align around shared goals, change becomes more sustainable. Collaboration also builds trust. When stakeholders feel heard and included, they are more likely to support implementation and adaptation. This shared ownership reduces resistance and encourages ongoing refinement. Another key concept is consistency across systems. When related initiatives align, implementation becomes smoother. Consistency helps avoid confusion and ensures that standards are applied fairly and effectively. It also simplifies communication with families and educators, making expectations clearer. Consistency does not mean rigidity. Flexibility remains important to accommodate local needs and circumstances. The goal is to provide a strong framework that allows thoughtful adjustment rather than enforcing one-size-fits-all solutions. Transparency supports this balance. Clear explanation of goals, criteria, and processes helps stakeholders understand why changes are made. Transparency reduces uncertainty and supports constructive feedback, which is essential for long-term success. Feedback plays a valuable role in refinement. Students, families, and staff offer practical insight into what works and what needs adjustment. Listening to this feedback allows programs to evolve in ways that remain responsive and effective. Another important consideration is long-term impact. Nutrition policies influence habits that extend beyond the classroom. Early exposure to balanced meals can shape preferences and behaviors that last into adulthood. This makes school nutrition an investment not only in education, but in future public health. Small improvements can have lasting effects. Even modest changes, when applied consistently, can contribute to better outcomes over time. This perspective encourages patience and persistence rather than expecting immediate transformation. Implementation also requires practical planning. Training, resources, and clear guidance help ensure that updated standards are applied effectively. Supporting those responsible for day-to-day operations is essential. When staff feel prepared and supported, implementation is more successful. Adaptability remains important throughout this process. As programs roll out, conditions may change, new research may emerge, preferences may shift, or logistical challenges may arise. Adaptable systems can respond to these changes without losing direction. Adaptability reflects learning. Programs that evolve based on experience tend to become stronger over time. This learning mindset supports continuous improvement rather than static compliance. It is also important to recognize that nutrition is only one part of student well-being. Physical activity, emotional support, and a positive learning environment all contribute to overall health. Nutrition policies are most effective when integrated into a broader approach to student wellness. Integration encourages coherence. When different aspects of well-being support one another, students benefit from a more balanced and supportive environment. This holistic perspective aligns with modern understanding of health and learning. Communication remains essential through